I say good afternoon, you say good afternoon. Let me say good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And we're here for Dr. Seuss. Everybody go, yay! Yay! Now I'm going to tell the story of the 500 hats of Bartholomew Cubbins.
Yay! Yay!
A long time ago, there was a little boy who lived in a kingdom with King Dree. Everybody say King Dree.
King Dree.
So every time I say King Dree, I want you to put your hands on your hips like this. Let me see it. King Dree. All right, very good. We got some things for you to do. Now, King Dree had a very large kingdom, but he liked himself very, very much. In his kingdom lived a young boy named Bartholomew Cubbins, and his family took care of cranberries and fruits. And one day, he went to market. He took his bag and put it over his shoulder, put on his favorite hat, and he went to the kingdom. And he saw a great big commotion, for the king had left his castle and was coming through the land. Everybody yell, yay for the king!
Yay for the king!
Now he went by in his coach. Now here's the thing. Every time the king comes, there's something that you have to do. When the king comes, you must take off your hat and bow. And the king rode by in his coach, and he said, stop! Go back! For he had seen that Bartholomew Cubbins still had a hat on his head. He opened up and looked out of the window. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he looked at Cubbins and said, you! Take off that hat. Now, Bartholomew said, but sire, I have my hat. And he had a hat in his hand. But on his head was another hat. Let's hear everybody say, take off that hat. Go!
Take off that hat.
And Bartholomew Cubbins took it off, but again, there was another hat underneath it. Sire, sire, wait, wait. And he tried to take off his hat again. And the king yelled again.
Take off that hat.
And he kept trying and trying. So 3 hats, 4 hats, 5 hats, 6 hats, 7 hats more were at his feet. Do you think the king was happy?
No.
No. The king free. Everybody put your hands on your hips. He said one more time.
Take off that hat.
And Bartholomew Cubbins took it off again, and again another hat appeared. Yes! He yelled to his guards, guards, take that boy to my castle. And the guard captain rode up behind him, picked Bartholomew up, and put him on the back of his horse. Off they rode to the castle, and along the way, the air kept blowing hat after hat after hat. 12, 14, 17, 18, 20, 32 hats on the way to the castle. The guard put Cubbins down and said,
take off that hat.
You'll get it. And Bartholomew says, but I'm trying to take the hat off. Look. And he did again. 21, 22, 23, 24. Till they got into the 40s and 50s. And there was still more hats. They pushed him along to go along. And as he walked along, everybody who looked at him said,
Take off that hat.
They passed and they said,
Take off that hat.
And they got even louder and they said,
Take off that hat.
And he kept taking off hat after hat after hat after hat until he reached the king's chamber. And the king sat on his throne. And he looked and he put his hands on his hips. And with a snarl on his face, he looked at Cubbins and he said, I'm going to give you one more chance. I want you to
take off that hat.
And Bartholomew Cubbins, he stood there and he took hat after hat after hat. The king called his royal accountant and asked him, how many hats is this now? Cubbins told him that up to this point there had been 47 hats. And he kept counting all the hats that were laying around. There were now over 100 hats. And there was still a hat on Cubbins' head. the king called for his wise advisor. Called for the wise advisor. Now, all advisors, they have a beard. So he stroked his beard, and he thought to himself, he went, and he went, and he decided to try to take the hat off of himself. And there was another hat underneath that. He went away in disgust. They brought over another advisor. And with her beard, stroked it, because all advisors have beards, don't you know? And she went, and decided to grab the hat. And there was another hat underneath, and she went away with that. Advisor after advisor came to attack, and more hats were still laying around. The king was not happy. He yelled to everyone,
Take off that hat!
and Bartholomew kept taking off hat after hat after hat. They even called in the royal magicians. And the royal magicians came in, and you need to help me with this chant. Please repeat it after me. Winkabus. Tinkabus.
Tinkabus,
Fotici.
Fotici,
Clay.
Clay,
Hat on this demon's head. Fly, fly away.
hat on this demon's hair, fly, fly away.
Howl, men, howl away.
Howl, men, howl away.
Howl away, howl away.
Howl away, howl away.
Yowl, cats, yowl away.
Yell, cats, yowl away.
Yowl away, yowl away.
Yowl away, yowl away.
Hat on this demon's head.
Hat on this demon's head.
Seep away, creep away.
Seep away, creep away.
Leap away, gleep away.
Leap away, leap away.
Never,
Never,
ever
Ever
come back.
come back.
Bartholomew stood there as magician after magician after magician after magician tried to take off the hat, but he still had a hat on his head. The king put his hands on his hips, and he said,
take off that hat!
and he tried, and this accountant was finding now that the hats numbered over 200. He called, and kids, don't worry, but he called for his executioner. Everyone go, ah! And the executioner came, and he said, yes, my lord, what shall I do? And the king said, he shall not take his hat off of me. Take off his head. And so the executioner said, all right, my lord, I'll do so. So he took Cubbins and pulled him down, down, down all the way. And he said to Cubbins, take off your hat. Just like, everybody try that. Take off your hat.
Take off your hat!
And Cubbins tried. He had 201, 202, 203, 204. Now, there's a rule in executioners, whether you know this or not. You can't cut somebody's head off if they're wearing a hat. So the executioner said, young Cubbins, I can't take off your head. I'm sorry, but I see that you are trying. So he sent him with him back up to the king. The king was not happy with this news. But his nephew, the Grand Duke, had just come into the center and was about the same age as Bartholomew, and he said, what's going on here? Why does he have a hat on? Your present, your majesty. And the king said, he won't take his hat off of me. The young duke went over and he tried to take off his hat. Did it work?
No.
He tried to do it again. Did it work?
No.
And again, and he got angrier and angrier, and he said, I've got something. And he went and he got his father's bow and arrow. And he took many arrows, and they went upstairs all the way to the top of the turret, made Cubbins stand on the side, pulled a bow, and right in the hat went off, but what do you think was underneath that? Another! And again! And again! And again! And the Grand Duke was getting angrier and angrier and angrier. He pulled him back down to the king and said, He will not take his hat off for me. There's just more and more hats. The king was beside himself. He was so angry that this young lad would not take his hat off for him. The Grand Duke said, I'll push him off the castle turret, and that will do for him. Was that a good thing?
No.
But he got pulled and he was like, no, please, please, I'll take off my hat and 352. And he's taking off more hats in each one. But what's happening is, each time that he's taking off a new hat, it gets bigger and more feathery and more feathers and larger and larger and larger, and the accountant is going behind him and he's counting. And when he gets to the very, very, very top of the castle, the most beautiful hat anyone had ever seen before. Bigger and fluffier and more regal and with more feathers than you had ever seen. The king had been following them, and so had the accountant. And he'd been counting the whole ways. And when he looked at the hat, he said, that is number 500. Now the Grand Duke wanted to push him off and make him fall and go, ah! But the king said, I like that hat. Will you sell me that hat? Bartholomew Collins said, Your Majesty, it'd be my pleasure. And he took off the 500th hat and he sold it to the king for more gold than his family had ever seen in their entire lives. And there was no more hats on his head. The king put on the hat and he proclaimed Bartholomew Cubbins his haberdasher, and for those of you that don't know, his maker of hats. And for the rest of his days, he and his family never had to worry about money, and the king proudly wore his most beautiful of hats. And that is the story of the 500 hats of Bartholomew Cubbins.